like to welcome everybody to the second episode of Paranormal Planes Podcast. And I'm still waiting for everybody to get me their ghost stories or paranormal events, Bigfoot, UFOs, anything. We want to try to cover all the aspects of the paranormal, as long as they're happening in the Great Plains area. That's the only thing I ask, is we want to keep the podcast true to the area that we live in. I know there's tons of ghost stories out everywhere else, but I am personally interested in the things that happened in our area. You know, that's the things we could actually drive to and check out, or know of the place that it happened. That's what the cool thing to me is. And tonight, don't have any stories from anyone else, so I'm going to do like I did before and share like personal experiences and go through and find some UFO reports that were from South Dakota. And I think I'll try to go to the stories that are online from South Dakota. And I'll be waiting to hear from you guys so we can get your stories on the podcast, and you don't have to worry about anybody, making fun of you or anything, because we can do it totally anonymous, or just use your first name, or totally make up a name, just however you want us to read the story. Go to Facebook and look for the Paranormal Planes Podcast, and you can send us a message, or even post your story right on the site there, and I can read it in the next episode as well. And if you want to, if it's easier for you than typing, you can actually just record your experience in MP3 format, or any format that you have actually, and send it to the Paranormal Planes Podcast page, and I can take that clip and make it into something that'll work to fit into the episode, if you prefer to read your story yourself, or if it's easier for you to document it that way. Okay, our first story is entitled Get Up Now, and it is from Lakota Wayne, and it is from South Dakota. It doesn't give a town in here, though, that I see. This happened 2 weeks ago. Thought all of you could use a chuckle. I'm a mother of 2 babies, born 11 months apart. My eldest will be 2 in October. My youngest turns 1 next month already. As you can guess, I'm exhausted all the time, but I'm very happy to be. For what transpired to make sense, I need to explain the sleeping situation a bit. It is customary for children under 3 to be in the same room with mom and dad, so they can be cared for quickly and sent back to sleep. My son has his own bed away from our bed a bit. Around 5 a.m. every morning he wakes up crying. I change his diaper, let him have some water from his sippy cup, and he's ready to go back to sleep, but on my side of the bed. I take our daughter to his bed and lay down with her. This gives me a chance to lie on my left side, since she can't lie next to the safety rail. I don't have to box her in between myself and my husband, with me lying on my right side to prevent her from falling out of bed. Before everyone goes crazy warning about co-sleeping, please understand I have every precaution in place. Plus, I'm very in tune with my children, and the slightest movement or lack of movement has me wide awake. The lightest whimper, and I'm up and comforting whichever baby made a peep. Now, on to the experience. I had switched places with my 22-month-old son and settled down with my daughter in my son's bed. My daughter woke up to nurse, and I accommodated her. I fell back to sleep. My son decided to wake up at 5:30 a.m., giggling, and they were talking in their baby talk language. Pretty soon, my son comes to the foot of his bed and climbs up my feet, and begins bouncing spring mattress to try to get me up. I groaned, "Baby, Mommy's tired. Please climb back in bed with Daddy and go to sleep." I switched onto my right side, placing my daughter near the wall and having my back against the safety rail. She settled down to nurse, and my son had gotten off his bed and stood over my hubby saying, "Dad, Dad, Daddy." Needless to say, my hubby slept through that. Suddenly, I hear my son say, "Mom," and the foot of the bed begins bouncing rhythmically. I thought it was my son attempting to get me to get out of bed, but I hear his voice behind my head. Urgency creeping in. Uh-oh, Mom. Mama, uh-oh. I said, "Baby, please stop bouncing and lay down in Mommy's bed," and the bouncing increased. I moved my left foot a slight bit and felt a super warm toddler, or so I thought, body against the top of my foot. My son is reaching through the safety bars, tapping the side of my face. "Mom, Mom," in a drawn-out urgency. This was it. I was wide awake. I didn't attempt to look. I just said in a loud, calm voice, "Okay, I'm up. I'm getting up." The bouncing stopped immediately. I got onto my hands and knees and crawled backwards out of bed at the foot and reached over the rail to grab my daughter and hold her to my chest, grabbed my son's sippy cup off the dresser, and we headed to the bedroom. As I looked at the clock on the living room wall, the time was 6:02. While I was making breakfast, I did my normal routine of looking out the back door window for our little garden. Then I had seen it. The heirloom tomato plants had been blown over and was uprooted, looking pretty Usica, and I guess that means in a bad way, shape, or pathetic. I turned off the stove and went outside to fix the tomato plants. My son came outside with me after all the plants were again back to normal. He touched the leaf on each plant and made a kissing sound. Once he was satisfied he had kissed all the tomato plants' boo-boos, he went back inside and we washed our hands together. By this time my hubby was up, asking what happened, and of course the whereabouts of breakfast. I told him about the tomato plants and what happened to them when we had a swift, windy rainstorm around 5:30 a.m. I didn't tell him what happened in our bedroom. He said, "Ah, that's why a nature spirit was waking us all up." Creepy. He laughed a hearty laugh when I told him of my experience in bed. He said the nature spirit shook him awake and told him, "Go help your wife." So he had thought something bad had happened to me, and that's why he got out of bed without the smell of breakfast prompting him to wake up. For the rest of the day, the top of my left foot had a hot, felt like sunshine, always on the spot sensation where it had been touched by our visitor. And now we're going to move on to some UFO stories. This one comes from Howard, South Dakota, and it was reported August 5th, 2017. Red lights moving southeast to the north. One made a 90-degree turn. This is the second time I have seen these lights in 5 days. The first sighting was on 7/31/17 at approximately the same time. I will start with that sighting, but I am using this date because it was the most recent. On the night of July 31st, I went out and sat on the side of the steps of my house to have a cigarette. My steps faced to the east. The sky was clear and just beginning to get dark. There were wispy clouds very high up and a light breeze from the south. The moon and stars were visible. I looked to the southeast and noticed a very bright, dark red light coming from that direction. I watched it cross the sky, and it went behind a tree that is in the neighbor's yard about 25 feet high. When it came out the other side of the tree, I could see the red light, and it headed to the north. When it was just about out of view, the light was no longer visible, but it looked at that time to be a very black cylindrical shape. About a minute later, I saw another and called for my brother to come out and look. It was identical to the first. He thought at first it was a plane, but there was no noise at all, no contrails, absolutely no sound. The light was steady, not flashing. It too moved in the exact path and looked to be a very black cylindrical shape as it went out of view. About another minute passed, and we saw another of these lights come from the same direction, only it looked a little more pinkish red. It, too, flew the same course and at about the same altitude, which I estimate to be about 1,000 to 2,000 feet. I am not good at distance, so this may be incorrect. As we watched, 4 more came, spaced about the same time apart. Some seemed to be further to the east, and some coming closer to where we were, almost directly overhead. Most of them blinked out when they were parallel to us, or when they had gone a little farther north. Since we could not see the red light on the first 2, as they went out of view, it is possible that they turned if the lights were attached to some kind of craft, or they just blinked out. I got my video camera, but I was shaking, and that video did not turn out well. The lights through the camera looked orange instead of red, but to the naked eye, they were red. My brother thought they might be Chinese lanterns, fireworks, but they seemed too high, and some flew faster and some flew slower. Now, the August 4th of 17, again, I went out to have a cigarette before bed. I happened to look to the southeast and was amazed to see the same lights as the previous sightings, again coming from the southeast. At this time, 2 came at once, and the one was furthest to the east all of a sudden made a 90-degree turn and went straight east. I hollered for my brother, but he was upstairs and didn't hear me. I continued to watch and witness 4 more of these lights. One flew almost directly overhead. I got my video camera again, and this time the video wasn't quite so shaky. I tried to zoom in full, but it only caused the light to look like a diamond shape, which I know to be something with a camera and not correct shape of the light. These were identical in every way to the ones that I had witnessed previously. The conditions of the sky were the same also. Again, there was no sound, no smoke flare, no contrails, nothing. I could not see a shape of these, only the very bright lights. I have no idea what they were, but the one making a 90-degree turn east was what made me wonder what it was that I saw. Well, my personal opinion, it sounds like airplanes, but airplanes don't make a 90-degree angle, so maybe that was a little bit different, but yeah, it just sounds like planes coming from Sioux Falls heading over to Howard, but who knows? It could be something unexplained.
This is a real story. East of Porcupine is a back road called Shepherdson's Road. There is also an old ranch house. This house is creepy. It will send chills up your back when you enter it. It is thought that a touted soul died in or near this house, and it now haunts all that live there or within walking distance. I live half a mile away at most. It all started when I made my homestead here at 21 years of age. I was living in a trailer house. No water or electricity had been yet established at the new site. While doing grounds work, I heard children talking, but the nearest house is another half a mile away. No children here. The resident in the ranch house, who moved out about the same time I moved here, passed on shortly after. My next new neighbors at the time were 2 muscled Native American men in their 20s and their mother. They would not stay in this house and moved because of the strange activity. Their mother became ill for months, but she beat it. Next resident was a close veteran cowboy mechanic type of guy, the type of guy who fixed everything. He was loud and not scared of anything. He was renovating the house and would not stay in it after dark. He said numerous times someone would be walking in the house, day or night. He often picked up someone in his peripheral vision, and items would move. Numerous nights he said someone had walked into the bedroom and held him into the bed pushing in his back to the mattress. He passed on in a car accident. The next resident, a real bona fide Hell's Angel, he said he tried to stay, but the presence of someone was there, so close he could feel them breathing on him from behind as he watched TV. He too experienced the force of someone on top of him as he slept. He also told me stories of someone choking him in his sleep. When the water pipes broke, he had to crawl under the house. He scrambled out from under the house because he could feel it coming after him. I told him one Halloween a few friends and I went into the house on a dare. We did not see anything, but later all felt evil presences in their homes. He said it had followed us and told us to be strong. He said a medicine man told him no amount of ceremonies would rid it because sometimes things like it refuse to leave because they have so much hate and they live off fear. His biker buddies would not even approach the house after a few times. He still asks me if it bothers us anymore. We had our premises blessed by a medicine man after the death of our 4-year-old son in a firearm accident. Next, our new baby was born having seizures 2 times a week for the first 6 months of his life. You might think, why not leave? Well, one night I awoke to see my baby's face pushed through the railings of his crib. Given this was not really happening, but I have seen it. It was playing tricks on me. I was so tired of all the noises and all that. This was it. I blew off the handle. I cursed every word in the world. I told it in more ways than one to leave my home. I truly hollered it. I cursed for probably 10 minutes at it. I have had no problems since, but I will never go back to that house to give it a lift into my home again. I have some new neighbors who built a home probably the size of a football field away from this house. I told them of it before they built the home, but they did not listen. Well, now they have a spook in their house and seldom stay there. We took pictures in the dark on Halloween, but we're too scared to develop them. The house is too old now. My neighbors who built the new home said their dogs went missing, and they went into the house to find them. They found them dead.
Alright, thank you, Angela, for that story. And now we're going to get back into a little bit of the UFO stories. I've got one that was a personal experience of mine. It happened about 2 years ago when I was out in the casino in Larchwood, Iowa. It's just like 10 miles from Sioux Falls here. And I was headed back to Sioux Falls, so I was headed west. And out of the west I see this really large, like, white object, and it's coming towards where I am. So I kept an eye on it, and when it got almost to my, I would say, 2 o'clock position, I stopped and pulled over and just watched it. But as soon as I pulled over, it stopped. I'm like, what? Like, maybe it was from when I was driving, it looked like it was moving, but that didn't make any sense either, because it was far off in the distance, and then it gets closer to me, and it just absolutely stopped. But it was in a way different position than it would have been if I would have, been going towards it, and it would have been something stationary in the sky. So I sat there for about 10 minutes, and it did not move at all. But as soon as I started up the bike and started going again, the thing starts moving again, goes past me, and keeps on going behind me. And I actually stopped again, and I watched it continue moving from where I was. So that was definitely something that I could not identify. It absolutely stopped for 10 minutes in the sky, like looking at me as I was looking at it. So I don't know of anything else besides like a helicopter that could do that, but there's no noise of a helicopter or anything. And why would they stop and check me out? How could they even see me with no lights or anything on the motorcycle, because everything was shut off? But weird experience, but pretty cool. Now we're going to go to some Minnesota UFO reports. This one occurred 9/10/2017, and it is from Mantorville, Minnesota. I was visiting with my parents this fall. My father had gone to bed, and my mother and I were sitting outside on the patio late at night, enjoying a fire. We saw what we first thought was lightning, but we discredited this after there was absolutely no thunder. It was eerily silent. The lightning became incredibly frequent, and honestly, it was quite startling. We couldn't see any bolts of lightning, but there were bright flashes about every 2 seconds in multiple parts of the sky. At this point, we were thinking it was just a lightning storm, but the flashes started to turn brighter. Instead of white, they were now green. Freaked out at this point, we were going to the car to drive towards the direction of whatever this thing was. As we were getting into the car, a plane passed overhead, but it made absolutely no noise. It was completely silent. My commute to work every day takes me past an airport, so I have seen many planes land and up close, and I have never seen a plane fly this low and this quietly. As it passed over us, you could feel the force of this thing, and it came close to knocking us over. Scared and curious, we finally started driving towards these flashing lights. After about 5 miles, we could see what looked like a giant cloud in the sky, almost like a hurricane you see on weather radar. Some kind of a hole where these flashes were coming from. We park on the side of the road to look, and the plane comes back. Whatever the hell this thing was, it came about 100 yards in front of us and just hovered it. It just hovered and stared at us. Incredibly scared now, we drive back home and went to bed. I'm really at a loss of words as to what I saw. Just a side note, our dog was acting incredibly strange all day that day. He hid under the bed, which is not like him at all. Well, that sounds kind of cool. I don't know, maybe a black hole or something like that. Let's try to go to South St. Paul. Everybody will know where St. Paul is. Dimly lit reddish orbs that turned over each other as if linked. On September 20th, about 9:45 p.m. in South St. Paul, Minnesota, I witnessed what I would describe as 2 dimly lit reddish orbs traveling from north to south at a moderate speed. They looked to be about the size of my index fingernail, held at arm's length. I would estimate their altitude at 600 feet above the Mississippi River basin. As I was on a bluff looking east over the river, their angle above the horizon was near 15 degrees. Also, they seemed to tumble over each other as if they were linked somehow. About 45 seconds elapsed from the time I first saw them until the objects went out of sight. That's pretty cool. Nice little UFO sighting. And now we're going to a ghost story from Brandon, South Dakota. I was spending the night at my friend's house that lives across the street. We both knew about his basement and how dark it was. He just moved into the house, so everything was not in its place yet. The owners of the house warned his parents about paranormal activity in the basement, almost a strong force they felt. His parents almost took it as a joke, but they would soon regret it. I spent the night at his new house, and we started to talk about the basement. We both took turns looking down the dark stairs. They were wooden and looked very rotten. We soon came to the thought to dare the other to sleep down there. After a long 30-minute debate, I finally chose to sleep down there. As I walked down the stairs, I felt something was wrong. I turned back to my friend, and he said, "It's nothing, there's nothing down there." I continued walking until I heard the door close back on me. I thought it was a prank that he was just pulling on me, but I knew that I had to sleep down there. I just rubbed the feeling off my shoulders and finally reached the end of the stairs. I tried the light switch, but it did not work. So I turned the knob and opened the door slowly. I scanned the room, nothing but moonlight from one window. I put down my sleeping bag by the door, just in case I got scared. Few minutes after I fell asleep, I felt a tug on my sleeping bag. and I look up and see nothing but red glowing eyes. Its eyes grew wider as I was still in shock. I eventually thought it was my friend, so I attempted to push it over with my hand, but my hand went straight through it. Its mouth grew large with blood red and screamed. I jolted up quickly and ran up the stairs, and I tried to open the closed door on top of the staircase, but it was locked. I pushed as hard as I could, trying to get it to open. Then I heard footsteps coming up the stairs to the door. It was my friend, and I jumped from the stairs crying, but my friend recalls seeing nothing behind me. I will never forget this day. It stayed with me ever since, and that is my real ghost story, and that was posted by Anonymous. Okay, if you guys are enjoying these so far, I just would like to please encourage you to get in with your own ghost stories. I think it's just going to make everything more exciting, more personal, and it's just going to be a lot more fun if we can get your ghost stories, UFO stories, Bigfoot, anything to the paranormal. There's so much that covers the paranormal. And from South Dakota, Nebraska, Iowa, Montana, and anything that I'm forgetting here that's part of the Great Plains, we definitely want to get people's stories in here and make this just an awesome community where people can go and either hear their stories or hear other stories and know that people that are having these experiences are not alone, you're not crazy, that there is a community of us out there that are intrigued by the supernatural, the paranormal. So let's get those stories in, guys. Paranormal Plains on Facebook page. You can just click send me a message, or you can put your stories right on there, and I will get them in the next episode. And if you want to, you can even go through and talk on an MP3 and send me that file, and I'll just add it right to the podcast. I've got all the programs to make everything sound good, and if you don't want your name used, just you can go by your first name, or just tell me you want it completely anonymous, and we can do that too. But get them stories in, guys, and let's start making this one heck of an awesome podcast. Next, we are going to have a story from Nebraska. When I was little, I lived in a small town called Papillion, Nebraska, just south of Omaha. It was a nice little town, the kind of place that nothing bad ever happens in, and that everyone knows each other well. Well, it used to be that way. The house I lived in was a nice 3-story house with a basement and an attic. We never went into there because we were afraid that we would fall through the floor if we did. We once went up to check it out, but never actually stepped in onto the attic floor. We saw old hay bales sitting up there, as well as a series of small rooms. In the basement, we have a family TV room, the laundry room, a guest room, and a playroom for me, my 3 brothers, and my older sister. The house was placed, oddly enough, close to an old graveyard and an elementary school. I remember that me and my friends used to sneak over my fence and play football in an old lot right next to the graves. Ah, good times, good times. Although I love this house to death and have very fond memories of it, it did have a history of sorts. No one in my family knows anything about what happened in the house before we moved in, but every once in a while, something very scary would happen, especially in the basement and bedrooms. The first thing to happen in this house was when my aunt came to visit from New York. My aunt was a very sweet lady, and we put her up in the guest room. But while there, she swore that she could never felt right in the basement alone at night. Something was there with her, and she could never put it more clearly than that. My sister tried to move her bedroom upstairs to the guest room once so she could have more privacy, but only slept one night down there. She said that it was just too creepy to sleep down there. I always thought that she was afraid of being alone. After all, everyone slept on the top floor, so she was all alone down there. But then, when I was very young, me and my sister both saw what you could say was a ghost. I'm not sure what to call it. It looked exactly like it. My sister saw it, or should I say them, first, and her experience was by far the scariest. She had a troubled childhood and suffered from hallucinations and sometimes even heard voices in her head. One night, while everyone was asleep, she said she saw an old man and an old woman pulling a small wagon with a small boy behind them. They were white, like a cloud, and floated in the air towards her. They made their way through her room, right up next to her bed, and reached out to grab her. She screamed, and the white figures went away. My parents came in a moment later, and she calmed down, but that wasn't the last time someone would see that wagon in the house. The next time, it would be me. I think I was 6 years old when I saw them. The little boy in the wagon, pulled this time by another small figure that looked like it may have been its brother. I shared a room with two of my younger brothers at the time. I slept on top of a bunk bed and was sitting up late one night, trying my best to fall asleep, when from out of the left wall of my bedroom I saw a small cloudy white figure, no older than me, I thought, pulling a small wagon with a little boy sitting in it, waving his hands like a baby would when he wants to go faster. I sat there transfixed, not believing my eyes, too scared to speak and too fascinated to look away. They walked into the center room, floating through the air as if there was an invisible floor beneath, stopped, looked at me for a moment, then turned their heads away, and walked straight through the wall. I never saw them again. My younger brother claims also to have seen a white figure standing in the closet of the room we shared. He never gave any details about what he saw. I'm not sure if I believe him or not, but my sister's and my aunt's account, I have no doubt were telling the truth. My aunt is the kind of person who never lies, and my sister, although she did lie a lot back then, really changed after this event. She started reading the Bible and accepted God into her heart, and since then, she has never heard voices in her head again, and was never visited by those ghostly figures. Her explanation for what she saw was that the devil was trying to conquer her, to take advantage of her weak faith and drive her away from God, which of course had the opposite effect. As for my account, well, you can choose to believe me if you want to, but I know what I saw. And now, we go to Iowa. I'm a 2010 graduate of Buena Vista University. I played football, and I'm not usually so worked up about paranormal experiences until I had my own. My senior year, I lived in the basement of Pierce Hall. My room was in the middle of the hallway on the east side. One day I walked in and the chairs were stacked up. I had no idea who could have done this, but I found a note that said, "Do you love me now?" on it. My roommate walked in and said a similar thing happened to him a week prior to me walking in with these chairs stacked. He also found a note like the one I found. After researching, I found out my room once belonged to a man who was found dead in it. He was murdered by his girlfriend, who disappeared after killing him and ran away. He was found with a note that said, "Do you love me now?" This conspiracy is covered up extensively by BV, though I am convinced my room was also the home of the deceased man. 6 months after my roommate found the chair stacked, he was killed in a car accident outside of Storm Lake on Highway 71. There was a note in his car that said, "Do you love me now?" I urge anyone who is staying in that room to be mindful of the unusual. And that was submitted by Anonymous. Now we're moving on to a bunch of short stories from Clarinda, Iowa. I was in the Clarinda Academy from 2010 to 2011, and I believe it was haunted. It just gave me weird, creepy feelings. I always felt like someone was watching me. I worked at the Clarinda Academy. The kids' rooms are in the MI buildings. Many kids and staff reported seeing and hearing things. One night, I was going up the metal stairs on the north side of the MI's to the girls' dorm and heard a male voice say, "Good evening." There was no one else there. Many other things happened while I worked there. Objects moving, voices, kids waking up and seeing a figure sitting on their beds. The Clarinda Mental Health Institute is definitely haunted. I have, and some of the people I have worked with, at the NSK and NSK AKS in Clarinda, Iowa, have experienced ghostly activities at both plants. One recent experience was in the new warehouse where I was able to catch a whistle on a video clip. You can also hear whispering saying, "Hey." Other experiences have been actual sightings, sounds of backup beepers of forklifts, rings flying and being tossed onto the floors, doors slamming, and voices. And that was submitted by Vicky. The other two were anonymous, by the way. They didn't put who they were. The next story takes us to Rolette, North Dakota. Got some stories from North Dakota in there, and hopefully we'll get some actual personal experience ghost stories that somebody will send into the Paranormal Plains page for us on Facebook there. I hope so. I moved here in 1991 and rented a homestead in the country. It was an old house, but I thought it would be nice to live on a farm. My husband started cleaning out the second floor for our two girls for their bedroom. We were living there for about a month when I had my son. I would set him in the rocker, and the rocker would rock ever so gently. As my son was getting older, he would reach up his arm, extended, and started laughing and giggling all the while he sat in his walker. One night, I asked my husband to warm up a bottle for the baby. He was not in bed, so I looked out the bedroom door and saw this dark figure sitting in the recliner in the corner. It was very dark, and I said, "Could you please warm up a bottle for the baby?" I rolled over and went back to sleep. Later, the baby woke up. I turned over, and the bottle was sitting on the nightstand warm. I fed the baby and fell asleep. Morning came, and my husband had the baby. He let me sleep in. I told my husband, "Thanks for making the baby a bottle." He gave me this strange look and said, "I didn't make the baby a bottle." I told him, "Yes, you did. It was on the nightstand, warm too. And I saw you sitting in the chair." He sat down and said, "I was nowhere near that chair because I had just got home this morning." I asked him, "Well, who made the bottle then?" After that incident, we would hear footsteps coming down the stairs. Those stairs would creak and groan when you walked on them. I would yell, "You girls in the house?" I would go to the bottom of the stairs and look, and no one would be there. I could see the girls playing outside. We were still living there on October 31st, Halloween. The girls went trick-or-treating in town. When they got home, we watched a movie, and it was getting late, so the girls went to bed. My husband and I started watching our scary movie marathon. We just sat down on the couch, and we had a south bay window. Then this round orb came in the window, and along where the ceiling and wall met, we watched in silence as it moved through the living room, into the dining room, and out of the north window. We looked at each other and said at the same time, "Did you see that?" I told my husband, "We're moving. I don't want to live in here anymore." We were out of that house in less than a week. I drive by the house on a daily basis to work. Every now and then you see lights, and several times my daughter would ask, "Who lives there, Mom?" I always see someone in the second-story window. I always tell her, "No one. It's been abandoned for years." And with that, we're gonna wrap up episode 2 of the Paranormal Plains podcast. And I would just like to encourage everybody to get their stories out there. I know everybody has had experiences of some kind. Well, not everybody, but I know there's a lot of people that have had experiences. And a lot of people I know have had experiences and have told me stories. But I'm not going to just tell their story without, getting it from them, because I don't want to miss out, parts of it or whatever. But I do remember, friends telling me ghost stories and such, especially people on my Facebook page. Get your stories to me, guys, so I can get them on the podcast. It'll be amazing to get stories from a bunch of the people that I know and a bunch of strangers that have their own paranormal experiences from the Great Plains area. So, for now, I think I'm just going to sign off and just encourage everybody to go to Paranormal Plains Podcast on Facebook and give the page a like and submit your stories to me or put them directly on the page there. Thank you guys for tuning in again, and I hope this only gets better and bigger, because I really enjoy coming down and putting the podcast together and reading all the stories that I have so far off the net. So I'm really enjoy stories from you guys. But for now, so long.